Today, we have the extreme pleasure of talking with Andy Zook of the band Bears and Other Carnivores. Andy and I met because our mutual friend, who is also a member of the Bare Naked Bravery community, he invited both Andy and I to perform a couple songs for a little backyard garden concert that he was putting on several weeks back. And while I was totally enjoying Andy's songs, Toss pulled me aside, our mutual friend, his name is Toss, he pulled me aside and said, "You have got to have Andy on your Bare Naked Bravery show. Your podcast and his podcast are the two I listen to every week, and he would be perfect." And of course, the Bare Naked Bravery community never lets us down because nominations are the way we get so many of our amazing guests on the show, and today is obviously no exception. So yes, Andy he's a singer-songwriter, he is a musician, he also has a podcast, and it's called Bad at Parties. And I know you will love it just as much as I do. So remember, as always, all the links to the things we mentioned today will be in the show notes for this episode over at barenakedbravery.com. So a link to his podcast is there. I also know that you'll love today's chat because we are covering topics like how to put yourself out there as an artist, how to reconcile the fact that you're probably doing things wrong, and then how to be wrong and still stay listening to your audience. We also dive into a topic that is near and dear to me, which is advocacy and art and how they overlap. So without further ado, I give you Andy Zook. You're listening to Bare Naked Bravery, a weekly podcast hosted by me, Emily Ann Peterson. As a singer-songwriter, author, teaching artist, and creative entrepreneur, I encounter some really fascinating stories. I'm on a mission to reveal the depth and width of bravery and its benefits to creatives like yourself. More than ever today, our world needs bravery, unique bravery, from everyone. This is the place where you find it. There is no script or censorship today because that's how these facets of Bare Naked Bravery are in real life. So if you're listening with little ears nearby, please know that some episodes may contain mature language and subject matter. One of the easiest ways you can share bravery with the world is to send this episode to a friend or two. Send them an email, text, or tweet, tag them in one of my Instagram posts, my handle is Emily Ann Pete, or leave us a review on iTunes. It takes seconds and can be done from your phone right now. Again, we need more bravery in the world, so let's be brave together. Andy Zook is with us today. I'm so excited about this. So to give you a little bit of a background, Andy and I played at this random little wonderful, magical little house concert in the back of one of our mutual podcast listener, Toss. He listens to the show and then immediately pulled me aside and said, "You have to have Andy on the show. He's my nomination." So if Toss thinks that you are brave and worthy of Bare Naked Bravery, then I do too. And I'm really excited to discover how and why. So welcome.
Thank you, Emily. Thanks for having me on. Yeah, Toss is great. And Toss has been on, I don't know if he's been on Bare Naked Bravery, but he's been on my podcast as well. So listener and participant.
I know. It's so great. I love it when listeners get to, so that's part of the deal with Bare Naked Bravery is that the majority of our guests have been nominated by someone else to be on the show.
Very cool.
Because it goes back to, in my mind, there are three types of bravery. There's the internal, like the acknowledging to yourself that you might need to get a divorce. There's the external, actually doing it. And then there's the resonant bravery where you see someone else doing it and go, "Oh my gosh, that's that's a really ballsy thing."
Very cool.
So yeah, I really love having a representation of the resonant bravery on the show. And it's so cool to have you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely an exciting piece that the podcast, it's a definitely exciting piece to have that as something that has actualized and has come to fruition. And I think that it is one of those things that very much as it becomes something more and more that I do, I see it empowering that same type of action within other portions of my life, and I'm sure that you've experienced this with Bare Naked Bravery, and that listeners who are engaging with the things that they're hearing, they're saying, okay, maybe if I try this little thing, it does tend to create momentum within itself and say, like, okay, you did that thing. Now, isn't this other thing that was also scary a lot less scary? I don't know. It's been wonderful having that and seeing the way that that's evolved.
So you have this podcast called Bad at Parties,
Mm-hmm.
and I've listened to a few episodes since we've met, which is just recently. So
Right.
I'm still catching up. But Bad at Parties, you're basically having these conversations with other people in the creative community, in the Seattle community, and talking about really pertinent things to each other's careers and creativity. And I truly appreciate it. So why did you start the podcast?
Yeah, it was at a time when I was listening to a lot of podcasts. So there was that inspiration already happening. I think, like a lot of people, I was listening to things like Serial and This American Life and other NPR put out things that are kind of on a big far front where there are, sponsors and all of that good stuff that make it so that there's backing, there's somebody to edit it. And the more I was listening to them, I was getting really into a podcast called You Made It Weird with Pete Holmes. It's a really great, really long, you've listened to it, right? You've heard this?
I love Pete Holmes.
Oh,
yes.
So great. Such a great person, such a great podcast, such a great television show creator. Crashing, are you watching this? Oh, it's fantastic.
I haven't started watching it. It's like I have a long list of things that I need to watch.
Ooh,
it's definitely on the list. Tell you, I'm so stoked.
If you need something to watch on HBO between episodes of Game of Thrones and Westworld, Crashing is killer. It's absolutely killer. So anyways, I'm listening to You Made It Weird with Pete Holmes. I'm doing other things like this. I'm feeling very inspired by that. Simultaneously, I'm starting to re-engage in therapy. I've grown up going to therapy at different times in life. I saw, hey, I'm in a time in life where I need to begin re-engaging with that. I should probably start seeing a therapist again. There's some stuff I want to work through. And a big thing that was starting to reveal itself as I was thinking about what do I want to talk about in those settings, I was also saying, like, I want to talk about these things in day-to-day life. It comes a lot from feeling socially anxious, feeling like I don't have a lot to bring to the table. People don't want to spend time with me. People don't want to engage with me. Really negative talk that I think a lot of us experience, just in different amounts at different points in life. And I was finding this to be one of those times in life where I was feeling more of it. So going to therapy was one step, but I've done that step before, and I really felt connected to these podcasts and found myself being like, I wish I was doing that. I wish I could be having those conversations. A friend had actually invited me to be on a podcast that they were doing at the time and are no longer doing anymore. And it just felt like well, they're doing it. Why can't I do it? And it doesn't have to have a sponsor. It doesn't have to have all these editing stuff. And I just had talked with one of my friends. The first episode was with this great artist, creator, empowering person named Chris Crawford here in Seattle. And he just said, you know what, dude, if you want to do it, let's do it together. And I was like, yeah, let's do it tonight. And we just did that first episode. And from then it went straight into a weekly podcast where I then said, great, I know the concept. I understand what I'm going to do. I get the premise. I'm going to start reaching out to people. And it was very, very terrifying to reach out to those folks. But the conversations, it quickly became I'm not scared of these conversations. I'm scared of the idea of these conversations. So that was really where it started to take off when I felt like, okay, I can set these up. And once they're happening, I'm going to be just fine. I'll live.
What about the idea of the conversations made it scary?
I think that when we think about fear, it's not the monster that we're scared of. It's the concept of the monster or not seeing the monster. In horror, we're oftentimes afraid of the shadow or the sound. And when a television show just is like, this is the creature you're afraid of, you're not very afraid of it. It's a beast to be conquered, and I understand it. So I think within that, it was the fear of what could happen. What if I'm talking with people, especially artists who I respect and am challenged by, and I go to talk with them, they hear me and they think, this person doesn't know what he's talking about. I really probably should just say, yeah, we got through that episode, and then kind of distance myself in an artistic realm. I'm sure that people would still be friendly and kind, but that they would start to say, yeah, this isn't really somebody that we want to engage with. And just saying like, that could happen. That is possible. But the likelihood of that actualizing, like the likelihood of that coming out is really bizarre. Like I don't think people have that much malice that they're carrying around. And if they do, why would I want to engage with them in a creative element or space? Like that's not creating an environment of safety and creativity. So one and done, I'll get past it after that.
Totally. I find that when you are, or there are a lot of types of people, let's just say this. Sure. There's a lot of types of people, and there are the Band-Aid rippers, those like recognize the difficult thing and are like, okay, let's just like do it before I change my mind.
Yeah, take it right off right then.
But then it sounds like you also have a little mix of this, like, but I want to understand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I'll say this all the time on the podcast that I do, but I had this great teacher that always used the phrase research is me search. And I think that that's true, not only in like therapeutic environments or things like that, but it's also true in, just community environments and like understanding ourselves and understanding what we're trying to talk about with anyone. If you're engaging in an art form, if you're trying to talk about like, why do I like this dissonance? Why do I want to change this meter? All of this research that's really oriented in a form of play is a way that you're trying to understand your own body, the way you're reacting emotionally, sensorily to these things that are happening around you. And I think once you hit this moment where you say, any curiosity is really introspection, then I think that empowers you to say, I have all of the tools to understand the vast majority of these things because I can start questioning myself.
I'm writing that down. Any curiosity is really introspection.
Yeah.
Because it's so right. That's right on. Research is me search. I love that.
It's fun. I think something that's been helpful in that is taking that idea and starting to engage with that with something that feels terrifying to me, which is politics. I am so afraid of looking like I know nothing in a political scheme, or if like people are saying like, oh, let's talk about advocacy. I think a lot of artists can shy away from that because we can hide behind our art and say, look, here's a really political statement, but I don't know facts very well. And I don't know how to engage in it in a conversational format. So when you realize like, well, that fear is actually coming from my ability to be introspective and understand this, like anytime you're engaging with that, just say, why am I uncomfortable in this moment? And like, this has been super helpful for me to say, well, then what do I need? I need tools, and getting connected to people who are doing the work and investing in them so that I am growing by the labors that they're producing, finding activists, paying them for the work that they're doing, that they're going to do, whether you're paying them or not. There's this really great artist who came on my podcast, and she is an activist. She's a writer. Her name is Marissa Johnson, and she is a co-creator of this project called Safety Pin Box. And as a Black woman, she's like responding to the safety pin movement, where people are like taking safety pins as white people and plugging them on themselves and like, Bean, look, I'm a supporter. And her saying that's allyship on white people terms. And so instead, what she's doing is she's created the subscription model. You can look it up. People can look it up and learn all the facts about it. But I'm subscribing to that and saying, great, I want to be an ally, but I want to be an ally on the terms of somebody who's Black, who's a woman, who's an activist in this community, and say, how do I support you? Not, here's how I'll support you.
Yeah, it's so important. And I think, like, I just finished writing this. I want to talk about songwriting too in this, but
yeah, do it.
I just finished writing a song that is very much more of an advocacy song than a, oh, what a sweetie,
sure,
like, or, oh, my heart's broken kind of song. And that was it was so nerve-wracking to me to face that, to even face the idea that, oh, the people on behalf of whom I'm writing this song, if they listen to it and think it's bullshit, or they think that it's like the wrong viewpoint or wrong perspective, then does that make writing this song completely futile? Or does that make my perspective of what they're going through completely worthless? or there's so many ways to look at your art when it's combined with advocacy and talk yourself out of it.
Yeah. And I think a big part of that is opening up your community and opening up your exposure that you have and saying like, okay, if I'm writing this song about police brutality against people of color, and then I want to think, how do people of color respond to this? And I look at my community and I don't see any people of color that I can ask. Maybe the point isn't write this song. Maybe the point is go change your community, go fix that. Like that's a way bigger picture. And it's great that you wrote that song, because how else would you get to that conclusion?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I think here's how I ended up finishing the song, because that did end up happening. I'm talking in like hypothesis, and you're like, this is a real story, Andy. Totally. No. But you're spot on that. Like you have the things that you put out there are a reflection of who you are and what you are taking in, right? So if you are, let's use the police brutality, for instance. If you're writing about it, you don't have any representation in your immediate community who has experienced this, then yes, that is an option. That is one way to be an advocate. But there's also the advocacy of just saying, listen, this is what I see, and this is how I'm witnessing this, which I think is powerful, but it also, I think it does need to have that sounding board of the people who are actually going through it. So just so you know, that is my next step with this song.
Good.
Is to bring it to people who have more of a stake in the pain that I am writing about. So
I would absolutely agree. And I think that, it's one of those things that it is tough, it is scary. And it's also like, I think that there's always that fear of, what if I take my art and I present it to somebody and they critique it and I have to change it? Like I present this and they're like, actually what you're saying, it has some microaggressions in it that you're not realizing, but they're there. And what you think is helping is actually harming. Like, to have that moment of realization, it's so much easier to just bury your head in the sand and be like, I don't want to find that out. But like, I think like what a great tool to find out, oh, this is what I was doing. I'm empowered now. And I think that that's been helpful on the podcast to say stuff and have people publicly disagree with me, to have an unedited podcast where I can be wrong in that format and say like, that's a big part of this. And so I think that that can be a really good thing for people who are afraid, who are wanting to be brave, and say like, great, go be wrong in a place. Like, go say like, I might be wrong somewhere, but I'm going to be listening. I'm going to be looking for what people have to say, and like say like, and then I will change. And maybe you don't have to change. Maybe you're doing it right. But probably we all got to change a bit.
Whew. What have you experienced in your own songwriting in this regard? Because your band Bears and Other Carnivores just came out with an album in April.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I'm just curious to hear what your songwriting process is like, either with the band or just personally.
Yeah, no. And I think that that's really good to think about that in that context of where am I needing to change and things like that, and receiving that. I think that when you start playing with a band, like I'll very much write in this process of, I'll write a song, I'll write the foundation of it, guitar part, which is how I write typically, and then also vocals with lyrics that I'm crafting. So there's a concept, there's some foundational structure to it before I sit down with the band and start saying, okay, this is going to change, this is going to be adjusted. Maybe we're going to change the chords, maybe we're going to remove these sections, things like that. But there have definitely been moments in presenting songs to the band, and they're saying, hey, you're saying this thing about somebody else. Let me see if I can, like, you're talking about your relationship with somebody else who is going through a lot of pain, and how you recognize that you have to choose to support yourself and other people rather than to support them. And that's like part of the song. It's the song called Gone Ghost, where I am actually writing about when I used to work at an at-risk youth home and leaving that space. So I've had conversations about that in the band. I've had conversations of that outside of the band And it's on the EP as well, where I'm saying, yeah, the choice in this was, I don't believe in the way that this system is helping you, and I can do nothing to change it. And it's also destroying me. So I'm going to leave, but I also feel this guilt about leaving, and kind of just having this unresolved element that is part of it. It's like, this is guilt, this is pain. And like having people come to me and saying like, I think that that's the wrong choice. I mean, like, that's part of the conversation. So yeah, I've definitely had people come back to me with ideas like that.
But I mean, I think it's still really powerful that as an artist, you are willing to put yourself out there and be wrong, or put yourself out there knowing you could possibly be wrong or probably are wrong.
Right.
And still stay soft enough to hear and listen to the feedback and the response and the consequences of what happened from you putting out a song that totally botched the details or whatever.
Right. And this is me saying, I'm saying all these things as truth, in kind of like me saying, I'm really good at names, not because I'm good at names, but because I'm trying to be good at names. So I'm just speaking truth into it. Like, I'm still like very much the person who's like, I get critiqued and it's very impactful to me, and it's painful, and I might be reactive and mean, you know?
Of course. But it still says something to be having this conversation about art and putting art out there, knowing that it might be wrong, knowing that it might hurt some feelings, knowing that it might step on some toes or break some hearts in the process, you know, like, does it make it worthless then if you're wrong? I don't think it does. Personally, I don't think it does.
Yeah. And I think that there's no, like, if you give that a simple answer, like, is it always this or is it always that? You're going to be wrong in either way, because it's such a nuanced thing that is based on how we agree to view the world. And I think that's a big part of this. Like, we talk about artists and we have all these concepts about like, is it okay to write these types of things? Is it okay to do these different things in the content that we're presenting? You take some people that might be uncomfortable with me swearing on stage in front of people, or that might be offended by the content of just like, oh, I believe in these ideas that are maybe counterintuitive to your religious beliefs, or things like that. And saying, okay, like, there is going to be some people that find that really freeing and some people that find that really uncomfortable. And I don't know. I don't think it's an easy answer. It's just like, what is the version of what you want this universe to be? How does it exist? And are you actively turning it into that? Because by singing those songs, by creating those paintings, by taking those photos and making them out there in the universe, you have actively changed the shape of the universe into something that is more like what you're trying to make it into by doing that. So it's adjusting, it's fluctuating.
That's so great. That's so great. But it's true. It's true. It's very true. There's a new class in the horizon. I want to make sure that you know about it. It's called Guts, because us creatives really do need the guts to get stuff out there and into the public. And that's what the class is about. We're just going to take 6 weeks and take one of your unfinished projects and have it go from start all the way to out there. And all the while, we will be applying these concepts that you're hearing about in Bare Naked Bravery all the time. These 12 ingredients of bravery. We're going to apply those to your unfinished project and then put your project out there. It's kind of awesome. And you're going to do that with a group of people. So I know from experience that by being part of a class that is live as opposed to pre-recorded and quote unquote evergreen, I know that it is really important to be involved, and it makes so much of a difference to have an active group of people, a small group of people to help you go through the things that are tough, like putting your work out into the world. So if this interests you, go to barenakedbravery.com/guts, and you can reserve your seat for the next time Guts is available and next time we're doing registration. It's exciting. It is worth it. It is sometimes terrifying, but that's okay because that's what your group of classmates is for. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the group if that interests you. And if you have any questions, go ahead and shoot me an email. It's just me on the other side. I'd be happy to chat with you a little further if you have any questions about it. barenakedbravery.com/guts. Let's get back to the conversation. Okay, so
you just moved. I'm going to interrupt your interviewing because we're also like viewing each other on this video. Yeah. And you were mentioning you just moved out to Orcas Island, right?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
That's so cool. I was just out there like super recently, and it's such a beautiful spot. And I'm very jealous of you. Are you loving it?
I am. I'm slowly learning of all the things that I'm like made a list of all my off-island events, like things like going to the eye doctor or possibly going and getting a pedicure. Like those are things I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have to get on a ferry to go do.
Dude, that's the realest thing. I have some friends out on Fidalgo Island who are musicians, and they're always complaining. They're like, yeah, the hardest thing about being out in Anacortes is that you have to drive so far if you want to buy socks. Like nobody sells socks in this damn town. Like, what are you going to do?
It's totally true.
You people, you romanticize Bon Iver, and then you get there and you want cornflakes, and there's no goddamn cornflakes, and you got to go back to town. You think you want to be this folk artist. You think you want to live in a cabin in the wood.
Oh, I have no qualms. I'm not trying to front about anything. The other day I posted in the Orcas Island Facebook page, like the buy sell trade Facebook page. I was like,
that's a crunchy Facebook page.
Oh yeah. I was like, where does one go to get a pedicure in this place? And there were a bunch of people that just responded with the haha emoji. And I was like, oh, okay.
Right.
I'm excited about being out here. I think that it'll be really good to be in the woods and separated from people and have some dedicated time to do what I want to do. Mm-hmm. And then also to be more in control of when I am out in the world, so to speak, like touring. Right. I'm doing it with great purpose and great intention. Like, hey, I'm off island. Here I am. Here I am to get my eye appointment. Get me some glasses.
Right. Dude, and then there's ceremony with it. Like, to be here, I have to get on the ferry. I have to go in this car. Like, these are intentional moments. And whether or not that changes the place you're going to, that changes you going to that place. Like, that makes such a big difference if you're going about it that way.
It's true.
I think that's why people like to do stuff like tour. You know, it's like, okay, there could be any band here, and that's fine, but you're going into these different places, and it's the driving on the road, it's the getting in the car, it's the being in multiple locations night after night. Like, it's how it affects you and what that makes you bring into a stage, and how that's completely different than if that was your hometown.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you a question. You've already mentioned anxiety once, and you're talking about touring. How do you deal with anxiety and that whole ball of wax when you're touring?
Oh, I've never toured. That's the simple answer.
That's
no,
fun.
I've never ever toured. No, I've never done it before.
Do you want to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm working on it right now. So I'm working on scheduling out like a 6-show tour in September, just doing some little Northwest stuff. The goal right now is kind of mid-September, looking at working with also, here's a brave thing. Let's just list off the shows that you haven't booked yet. So I'm looking at Anacortes and Spokane and Boise and Salem and Portland and Seattle, and just kind of working with some folks in doing a collaboration between my representing some Bears and Other Carnivores music, which is my band. So playing that solo, and then also incorporating some Bad at Parties concepts into the actual kind of small venue house shows as well. So
ooh, that's
yeah,
fun.
It's going to be fun. Yeah. Or maybe it won't happen and I'll just announce this and then never go, but probably I'm going to do it. You know, it's like I'm working on it. So if it doesn't, that's only because I failed, not because I didn't try.
Okay. So where else have you failed in life?
Most places. I'm at work talking to you on this, so there's a great location. Yeah, no, I think that when I think about failure, usually what that means is damaged relationships. Like if I think about the idea of failing, if I break something or if I do something stupid like that, it's just stuff. I'm not too concerned about things or stuff. And I mean, I like having enough money, but I'm not the person who is overly consumed. I think, I don't know what my wife will say, maybe different things, but I try to be balanced in that regard. But where I feel anxiety, the thing that's keeping me up at night is laying in your bed, staring at the ceiling and just remembering a conversation from 4 years ago where you had a kind of awkward interaction with somebody and you're just like, oh, good, let's replay that like 6 times, like in quick succession. I bet you're not going to sleep. Like that's failure to me and that's the hard thing is just like entering into any type of relationship, work relationships, my family, friends, and feeling like I did not give them what they deserved and continue to do that, continue to say, I don't have enough or I don't know how to truly properly be present with these people that matter so much to me. I'm not really representing that ever. And I still haven't. And so like learning how do I constantly move towards that idea. So I think that's where I don't know where, if I can say specifically, this is where I failed. That's where I'm failing right now. And I'm actively trying to improve.
That's,
I don't know.
Thank you for being honest. That was definitely a question that somebody could have sidestepped. So thank you for diving right into that. I appreciate that. There's a lot of people fail at businesses. A lot of people fail at work. A lot of people fail at their jobs and their careers and their art. And but I think that one of the most long-lasting part of failure or ways that we can fail is through our relationships and the people that we know. And it's sucks because we all do it.
Absolutely.
It's impossible to not fail in that area.
Right. And I think that what's difficult about it is I feel like the common theme, or at least the theme I'm engaging with right now, is kind of laziness or procrastination, which really all kind of bottle down to selfishness. Like, this is what I want, and does giving you the time you deserve make me not have as much as what I want as I think?
Wait, say that again.
I'm gonna phrase it in real world example. So let's put it with the band. Like, let's say I'm with my teammates who I make music with, and I'm showing up to practice, and they're like, "Great, we talked about this part that we're gonna work on," and I was tired all week long, and from last practice to this practice, I just didn't work on it. Instead, I just ate food, hung out, went to bed a little bit earlier, played some stupid video game, watched a show, went and got drinks with a friend, things like that. Just the stuff that you do that are immediate gratification. And I just was like, I won't play guitar right now. Even though I love it and I'll play other music even sometimes, I'm not working on the thing because it's work. And then I get there and it's frustrating. People are like, great, well, we have this expectation. And, they're very graceful people. They're never going to like attack me for it. This isn't something where I'm creating an earthquake that's erupting a volcano. It's more like I'm doing something that slightly doesn't offer someone the best that they deserve. And that can cause pain or missed expectations. But usually it's just something for me to carry because I know that they deserve more than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that feel like that answers that? Is that giving good examples? I don't know. This is a thing that's like really, we're actively working on this more and more.
Oh yeah. I mean, and in immediate gratification versus the long delivered gratification of having a really awesome relationship with your band or of spouse or kids. Oh my God, it's easy to pick the immediate gratification. That's why it's immediate, sure. Right? And it's really difficult to pick it's not necessarily hard, but it's less easy.
Yeah. I think I feel like it's oftentimes because, those things of being selfish. And my wife works in a coffee shop. She was giving me this great example and how it's like the carry forward of this, like someone's boss is a dick to them at work and like treats them with servile attitudes. And then they go to the coffee shop and they treat their barista that way. And like what she talks about, how do I then respond to that in a way that is saying, I won't receive this. I'm going to give like non-complimentary behaviors and I'm not going to act from a place of where like oh, you're right, I'm so sorry, but instead to be like, that's interesting that you would act that way, like to respond to it with curiosity.
How is that received? I'm curious.
I think that she does it beautifully. And so I think that she does a way that is not seeking to make the person feel like shit. I mean, maybe sometimes she is, we're all human and sometimes people are assholes and you want to take it out on them. But I think she's really good at respecting where she works, respecting where the people she's with, so that simply it looks like someone demands an apology. And rather than giving them an apology, you try to understand the situation and explain the situation better. Someone says, I don't like the way this tastes. You made it wrong. And you're like, oh, that's interesting. I think you don't like that flavor. And that's not how she's saying it. But that concept is, instead of saying, yes, you're right, I'm so sorry, I made a mistake, or, oh, I'm so sorry, implying I made a mistake, but saying, I did not make a mistake. We should understand this both better. So yeah, I think it's great. So that's that concept of, I'm totally losing my train of thought of where I was going with that, but I think I'll get it back. We'll find out in just a moment.
Well, regardless, while you think about it, yeah. I will say that I had a marketing client who was in the UK. This is several years ago. And when we were talking about customer service, I was like, well, because the customer's always right. And they were like, whoa, wait, what? I was like, yeah, the customer's always right. Like, you always bend over backwards to have the customer's experience be correct. And like, they're always the right one. And and they go, okay, no, in the UK, that's not how it is. Like, if you walk into a store and you're wrong about how you behave or what they're supposed to carry or what they don't carry or whatever, then the shop owner has no problem saying that you're wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that mentality. I think that the concept of like the customer is always right is like this super hierarchically based capitalistic concept that is created by people who are customers. That's people shouting at the shopkeep being like, I'm always right, at the person being like, fuck, I guess so. I need to eat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that way of thinking instead.
I do too.
I don't know where I was going with that thought before, but I love that. That's great. Did that change your way of approaching not only that client, but other clients as well?
Yes, to some degree. I mean, because they were in the UK, then that meant that the way that I was consulting with them changed because...
Sure. There's cultural difference.
They're dealing with a completely different customer service environment, right?
Yes.
But it has, like I now am doing more marketing consulting for global companies that have a wider reach, like across boundaries, like across cultural boundaries. And so when you're trying to put yourself out there, let's just say this, when you're trying to put yourself out there even as a big business, or you're one person trying to help a big business put themselves out there, your job is then to get in the heads of the people who are going to see or witness or experience the thing that has been put out there. Mm-hmm. And so it almost brings it back to, or keeping that customer experience in mind. Mm-hmm. Really helps if you can engage that customer experience into the product development.
Right.
And as a songwriter and as an artist, this totally applies, because if you're writing a song that's just about nonsensical words, if you're trying to have a very sensible, logical thought process throughout that song, and yet you're using nonsensical words,
right,
the experience on your audience side is going to be very different than the one that you're expecting them to have.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So if you can bring that, like, okay, eventually this piece or this work or this app or this product is going to be out there. Mm-hmm. If you can build and create and mold it according to how you want it to be received, oh my gosh, that makes the whole process so much easier.
Right. Which is why engineers shouldn't listen to this. If you're an engineer, just don't even listen. I'm just kidding. But yeah, just people out there just being like, no, this is the way it should function. This is just best functionality.
It's true.
Like, nah.
But there is that side of like, well, but the customer or the audience is not always right.
Right. It's true.
And then it's your role as the artist to communicate or change their minds or educate them or whatever. Mm-hmm. Ugh,
I love it.
You got me on a rampage.
Good. It was great. I never thought of, and I have this big belief in like, if I I'm not the type of person to be like, oh, I'm thinking of what I'm going to say next. Or if I am doing that, I try to stop myself. So in no way was I trying to figure out what I was trying to talk about before. So it's totally gone and it doesn't matter. Yeah. I know that we were talking about fear. I know that we were talking about overcoming it. If someone felt something good and they want to connect with that, shoot me a message, talk some more. You can be on my podcast. It'll be great. We can finish that thought later and do it offline.
Oh my gosh, this has been so fantastic.
I love it.
I have loved every ounce of this conversation. This has been so great. I would love to have you back sometime to talk about all the next things, and maybe you can tell us how the tour went.
Right? Oh, I'm excited and terrified. We'll see.
And you're more than welcome to join the Facebook group as well, and then pop in and keep us updated. We would love that.
Cool. Definitely will.
Thank you so much for carving out the time to have us in your day. I appreciate it a lot.
Well, thanks, Emily. I appreciate that you do this. I think that you're doing a great job, and I can clearly see people responding to it and it making a difference for them. And I think that that's the biggest deal. And also it's nice to listen to, Yeah. As a side note, it's fun.
It is really fun.
But I think it is making an impact.
Yeah, I really love listening to people like you and like Toss and like our other listeners and their nominations. I love hearing how other people take on this concept of how to put yourself out there, because it's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. Well done.
Cool. Well, thanks for creating the space for it.
So beyond your free Bravery bundle, which is always free and available for you, your brave takeaway from today's show is kind of a strange one. But as an experiment, I would like you to pick something safe, of course, but see what happens when you do something wrong. Perhaps on purpose, or maybe you just do something wrong and you ask yourself these questions. I'm curious, can you stay listening to the people around you? Does your ego want to take over? Will you try to explain yourself and hold your ground? I just want you to observe and see what happens. And then I want you to hop into the Bare Naked Bravery Facebook group to tell us what went down and what you noticed. Andy and I will be there waiting with bated breath and listening ears to your stories. So if you are not a member of the Facebook group yet, you can join us by downloading your Bravery bundle, which will automatically send you a link to join us, and it'll be great. Remember that all the links that we mentioned today are in the show notes for this episode over at barenakedbravery.com. And you can find Andy Zook and myself on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, on all the other fun places. So if you post about the show or post about our conversation, just make sure you tag us so that he and I can like and retweet and do all the fun, magical social media things for you. That is our show this week. Thank you again for listening. And if you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as he and I enjoyed making it for you, then please, I encourage you to give the show a review and rate it in your Apple Podcast app on your phone. It really does help us out a lot more than it is a hassle for you. And one step further and perhaps even more effective is sending a text to a friend and texting this episode to that friend who perhaps is going through some of the same things that Andy and I were talking about today. So share it, spread it as far and as wide as possible. You are a part of that, and I am so grateful to be in a partnership with you in spreading bravery around the world. So if you are digging the music in today's episode, that's because it's brought to you by Lee Rosevere. And if you're curious about him and all the other artists, musicians, and other sponsors of the show, go visit barenakedbravery.com and dive on in. We've got a whole bunch there's got a library of resources for you. So I am looking forward to being with you next time because we've got some awesome things in store. So until then, I have one message for you. It's this: be yourself. Be vulnerable, be imaginative, be improvisational, and be brave, because the world needs more of your bare naked bravery.